What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here with JaboctheGreat. Welcome back to another episode of The Last Word. Super Bowl Sunday was just a couple of days ago. And man, this one, you got the pick right here, but I don't think either of us expected Eagles to basically come out there and open up a can on the Kansas City Chiefs, back-to-back champions. They win this game 40-22. That's a really, that's a nice score compared to what the game really was. This was really all-out domination by the Eagles, especially that defensive line, man. They ate up that offensive line of the Chiefs. An offensive line that has multiple Pro Bowlers, and it did not matter. Mahomes looked bad. Forget what the stats say at the end of the game. He wasn't good. And this one, this game was really about that defense, really about Jalen Hurts coming out doing what he had to do, and well-deserved win for the Eagles to get their second Super Bowl, and they stopped the Chiefs from getting the three-peat.
Man, I mean, you know how bad of a game has to be for you to lose 40-22, and people say that's the nice score. 40-22 is still a blowout score, but right. it's better than what the game really felt like. And after 3 years of picking against the Chiefs in the playoffs, I finally land one. Not a super positive record on that, but I feel very positive about it in this moment. I'll break it down on paper. A lot of context for this one is that a lot of the Chiefs stats did come in the last few drives, and I'm not saying that to be a hater. It just does. If you kind of hear, if you didn't watch the Super Bowl, you listen to this, here's some of the stats, you might be like, how in the world did they lose that bad? Just because all of it came towards the end. Eagles kind of, took out their starters and whatnot. But yeah, we'll get to it on paper. The Eagles, Jalen Hurts, Super Bowl MVP, Jalen Hurts now, 17 for 22, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. He also led the Eagles on the ground with 72 yards and a touchdown because right behind him was Saquon Barkley with 57 yards. However, Hurts did it on 11 carries. Barkley had 25 carries. This is the one positive thing I'll say about the Chiefs, or at least the biggest positive thing I'll say about the Chiefs. They clearly had a plan to shut down Saquon Barkley. And it worked. Right. At 25 carries, 57 yards, no touchdown. And even on that drive where they tried to give it to Barkley the whole way through, he wasn't even able to punch it in at the end. He comes away with no touchdown in his Eagles Super Bowl. Comes away with the win. So I'm sure he's much happier about that. But the Chiefs clearly set out to make sure that Saquon was shut down. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that they set out to do anything else because on defense, they weren't able to stop the passing game. They weren't able to stop Jalen Hurts when he was running. They just shut down Barkley. And then it obviously ends up working pretty poorly for them. They get 40 put on him anyway. Devontae Smith was a leader for the Eagles in the air, 69 yards. He had a 46-yard touchdown to cap that off. Becomes the first Alabama receiver to catch a touchdown in the Super Bowl, which when I saw that stat, I was like, that can't be true, but it is in fact true. And then A.J. Brown was second with 43 yards and touchdown. Jahan Dotson had 42 yards, and Saquon Barkley had 40 yards as well. So Jalen Hurts spread it around to his team pretty well. This is the craziest thing that I think happened in that game. In my head is that the NFL's one white cornerback, Cooper DeJean, gets the pick on Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, which is crazy. It also happened to be on his birthday. However, it wasn't just a pick. It was a 38-yard pick six that to me felt like it really did. It just put a stamp on wait, this one actually might be over. Because at this point, you've already got a really good first drive or second drive from the Eagles where they scored. Then they throw a pick, whatever, not so great. But they scored a field goal, and then boom, 3 plays later after that field goal, you get this pick six. Now you're looking at 17 to nothing, and I'm thinking, actually, maybe they do this. But I'll continue here. Zach Bond also got an interception, pretty close to the end zone there to shut down the Chiefs, and then Milton Williams recovered a Chiefs fumble. Now, looking at it on paper, Patrick Mahomes at the end of the game goes 21 for 32, 257 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Led his team in rushing with 25 yards. There was never a point in this game where the Chiefs could really think about using their running game, maybe in the first quarter. But after that, it becomes clear you've got to get down there quickly. And they do just in the fourth quarter. And Xavier Worthy, for all this being garbage time stats and whatnot, I'm not really too much of a hater of some of these players. I think Xavier Worthy is a great young player. He did finish the game with 157 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the 50-yard touchdown at the end of the game. In his Super Bowl debut, these do come in garbage time, but still, rookie comes out and puts up 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. Can't be that mad about it. Travis Kelce was second with 39 yards. He spent the whole first half doing nothing. Matter of fact, I think it's the first time that he's been shut out in the first half before. Got it going a little bit in the second half. And then the other old man, DeAndre Hopkins, a former Clemson player. I respect him and miss him deeply. He was third, 18 yards and a touchdown that didn't entirely matter. Mahomes did recover a Creed Humphrey fumble. Some weird stuff going on with the O-line. Also lost one of his own. Then Brian Cook picked off Jalen Hurts early on in the game. That kind of made me think, all right, we're in for a battle. Didn't really work out. So, yeah. Chiefs took no extra point attempts. They went for 2 every time they scored. They missed the first one. Got the next one. So, yeah. This was a very interesting performance for the back-to-back championship champions. And I really think we talked about it. The Eagles had the number one defense. They need to lean on it. They need to lean on their run game. I thought maybe Barkley would be able to punch through whatever plan the Chiefs have for him. Instead, Barkley got 60 yards, which isn't anything to sneeze at. But Jalen Hurts was able to really make use of the run game. And that Eagles defense shut down Kansas City. It's not something I put on the stat sheet, but it's something that is incredibly important. The Eagles blitzed Patrick Mahomes 0 times. They sacked him 6 times, which is insane. The Eagles D-line to the Chiefs O-line was a beatdown all game, and I think that really makes the most difference in this game. It shut them down completely, and you end up losing 40-22. Obviously, the Chiefs aren't like a terrible team or anything, but you miss out on the three-peat. Eagles get a poetic win. They gave you your first one to start the three-peat. They stop you on the third one, so you can't get the three-peat. And yeah, I don't know. I'm happy to see Jalen Hurts become a Super Bowl MVP. I like him. So this was an interesting game. I think it was. We said this right before we started recording here, and I'll pass it to you, and we can go back and forth here a little bit. But definitely bordered on boring as far as the actual game after a certain point, because it's just like, all right, well, Patrick Mahomes on the ground, and he's on the ground again, and the Eagles are going to score. But it's what the world needed, I think. It's what the NFL needed, as you said. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I watched all the way through and had a great time. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to say like the NFL would be rooting one way or the other. A lot of people say, it's possibly rigged, and they have Taylor Swift, is Kelsey's girlfriend, so they want the Chiefs to make it as far as possible, blah blah blah. Like, sure, but I don't think the NFL like really cared one way or the other. Because I mean, look, on one hand you have the Chiefs, they do three-peat. A lot of people are going to be pissed off, but you do have the story of a team that, as long as there wasn't too many shenanigans with penalties and stuff, you would have had the story of a team being the first team in NFL history to three-peat in the Super Bowl era. Never been done before, so regardless of how it happened, I think that would have been a big story. But the Eagles, of course, Philly, they have the least amount of championships within their division. They still do as of now, but it is a very storied division, the NFC East, regardless of how it might be from year to year. We've seen some bad years in the East. No matter what, that is still a historical division. So a team in the NFC East getting their second championship. Philly sports, obviously polarizing sports town. So I think either way, it was going to be a good story. And it was evident by the fact that this is the most watched Super Bowl in history, 126 million viewers. People wanted to see the Chiefs lose, I believe. I'm not sure, the ratio of Eagles fans versus Chiefs haters. And people rooting for the Eagles, I'd say they're probably more Chiefs haters than anything. But still, Philly is a passionate sports fan base. So, we saw when they won their first in 2017 how crazy they went. They definitely went crazy, especially, in New Orleans there as well. But as far as the game goes, yeah, you're right. There's not really much to say. Like, let's be honest. You said, you brought up the fact that they didn't blitz at all on defense. They only brought 4 guys consistently from that defensive line. That's all they brought over and over throughout the game, and got 6 sacks off it. That's embarrassing. I don't want to say it's insane. It's embarrassing for the Chiefs offense. Offensive line was bad. Again, I mentioned it. They had multiple Pro Bowlers, and I know the Pro Bowl doesn't mean as much as it used to, maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but still, I think the offensive line should at least be something. Like they offered no resistance. I mean, even some plays where they had the running back come out, chip real quick, hit a quick block for going out for a route. Like, it didn't matter, and it should not be that hard. And I know we're sitting here saying that as fans, but like you got 5 guys, possibly 6 at times. You telling me they can't block 4 guys consistently? It's just rough. And Patrick Mahomes takes some blame in this too. I said it, he played bad. You mentioned it. Don't let those final stats fool you. Of course, you can't just give up in the game and not try to score at the end. I understand that, but empty calorie stats at the end there. Mahomes was not doing himself any favors either. I know that one interception, he was backed up in his end zone. He got pushed into by his own lineman because the defensive line again was eating. So his lineman got pushed back into him, forced that pick there. But the other pick was just bad, and even still, like he looked rattled. And even early on, I'd say probably drive 2 or 3 when they got a couple of those sacks, early on, back to back like that. I'm sitting there thinking this is pretty, really reminiscent of that Tampa Bay Super Bowl, and it was worse in the end. Because look, at least in that Super Bowl, they actually had guys injured. So, even coming into it, it's like, all right, they got guys down. How's that going to work? Going up against the Bucks defense, which was a good defense as well. But they had all their guys. Like, I understand, they moved Joe Tooney around, blah, blah, blah. But there's just no excuse, in my opinion. And, you can say, like, maybe they should have got more guys in the block. Again, get the running back in the block. Get the tight end to chip more. I get that. But it's 4 guys. Like, if you, as an offense, you can't handle 4 guys, I mean, come on. Like, I expect Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, which I understand hasn't been as amazing as it had been in the past, of course, before when they had Tyreek and when Kelsey was a little bit better, of course. It hasn't been that explosive, but I expect Patrick Mahomes at this point in his career, and I expect this Chiefs offense at this point in their dynasty. You should be able to feast going up against 4 guys. You should be able to do what you're supposed to do, come in, throw the ball pretty well, and then you're going to force that defense to start bringing more than just 4 guys. Because if 4 guys aren't doing their, I don't want to say not doing their job, you're not really expecting to go and get 6 sacks with just 4 guys. But if that front 4 isn't doing anything to the offensive line, they're not getting sacks, they're not getting pressure. Now you're going to force them to bring 5 guys, force them to bring 6 guys, and then you're going to have guys wide open. And one thing we've been hearing all, the last couple of years especially, Andy Reid with all these trick plays and he's scheming up this, scheming up that. He didn't scheme up a single thing. Like that, nothing. Like none of those trick plays, we didn't see any of those, nothing. Top to bottom, this was an awful game for the Chiefs offense. And look, I understand, take away the pick 6, obviously. So that defense, allowed a little bit over 30 points. They did what they could. I mean, you mentioned it, like Saquon Barkley, not like a bad game, but like it wasn't god awful. But I mean, he averaged 2 yards a carry, which, looking at it, I mean, it seemed like he really only got like maybe 1 yard every single time. Like that defense was on top of him. And last week when we did our picks, I mentioned all the running backs that they played this year. How many top guys that they held under 100 yards. I wasn't expecting that to happen for the Chiefs, but at the very least, you had to get Saquon contained a little bit, and they did that completely. Like you mentioned, unfortunately, though, they didn't do much of anything else. And you can only do, the defense can only do so much when they're getting nothing from their offense. I mean, they had 20 yards of offense in the first half. I mean, this is ridiculous. So you can't criticize the defense, of course. Some of the big plays, the Devontae Smith touchdown, AJ Brown touchdown. Look, I get it. But when your offense is basically non-existent, when you have nothing on offense, I don't really know what you expect the defense to do. So for me, everybody's going to say, who gets the blame here? Offensive line, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, not really scheming much of anything in this one. So those are 3 biggest problems. And even then, Travis Kelsey didn't have a good game. D-Hop, wasn't a great game from him. I mean, nobody on offense really stepped up outside of Xavier Worthy, which, again, was at the end. So not to talk too much about the blame there, you have to give insane amount of credit to how well that defensive line and defense overall, of course, for the Eagles played. Because when you look at it, I mean, the defensive line a couple years ago had, a lot more sacks. I mean, I think they broke that record for the sacks a couple years ago when they played them. or that team specifically, I should say. So this year they weren't really. It wasn't as focused on getting a ton of sacks, breaking sack records, or anything like that. It's just overall great defense. But when you're getting home the way they did, man, I mean, there's just really not much else to say. And Jalen Hurts had a great game. It wasn't like his game, a couple years ago where he went crazy outside of the fumble, but he did what he had to do. He deserved MVP. I mean, unless you split the MVP between all 11 guys on defense, he deserved that MVP there. So I think now, I kind of want to segue in a minute, but I think now he's kind of starting to cement himself clearly as a top 5 QB in the NFL. Because even compared to guys that I still think an Allen, a Burrow, a Lamar, might be better than him, he's got something that they don't. That's a chip.
Yeah, and I mean, he's had a team that's just as good as some of the teams those guys have had. Unfortunately, they keep falling down to each other, right? Josh Allen can't get past Patrick Mahomes. Lamar Jackson can't get past Josh Allen, or Patrick Mahomes sometimes. Joe Burrow got there and got beat up by the elderly home in Los Angeles. So it's regardless of what you think about them individually, you can clearly see that what Jalen Hurts is able to do for his team, even in this game, right? He doesn't have the Superman game he had a few years ago, and they come out and they win. And I think that's really important. That's a big thing to kind of have with you. And just to add to the defense, right? Obviously, you get Patrick Mahomes on the ground 6 times, and I don't want to say without trying, but without that being your main goal. But on top of that, you also really hold down the Kansas City, passing game, right? Like they're not trying to rush, so you don't have to do a whole lot there, but you break up a bunch of passes, right? Travis Kelce, 2 targets that he doesn't get. DeAndre Hopkins targeted 5 times, gets 2 of them. Juju Smith-Schuster got both of his. Xavier Worthy got all 8 of his, but that's later on in the game for the most part. Hollywood Brown, 6 targets, 2 receptions, and then after that, mostly 1 for 1 or 0 for 1 or 1 for 2. You do a really good job of disrupting the football game, either breaking up the pass directly or just making it to where it's not a real target, and Mahomes just kind of had to throw it over in that direction. And I think that's a really impressive thing. And I do agree that Jalen Hurts earned his Super Bowl MVP. Unless you were going to give it to the full defense, I think that's kind of what you got to do. Definitely earned by Jalen Hurts in this game. And yeah, we can talk about coaching for sure. Nick Sirianni, I don't think he did anything super tricky or crazy. He definitely coached a good game. He knew what he had to do. His coordinators worked well for him in this game with the way they carried it up. I think they knew going into this game that Barkley was going to be heavily targeted by the Chiefs. They still gave him 25 carries, but I think if you got to keep trying to push it here and there, and they mostly did it on first down. So you'd have Barkley carry it, he'd get a yard or 2, and then they'd be like, all right, whatever, and they throw it to somebody else, and then they give it to Barkley again, and it kind of felt like that's where we were moving. And it got a little bit to not to where it's formulaic in a bad way, but you can kind of feel that they were just like, you know what, we'll take 2 yards out of Barkley here and hope that maybe he gets more. And his longest carry was 10 yards, so nothing too crazy but nothing too bad there either. But Andy Reid does have this big reputation, and yeah, he's got plenty of Super Bowl rings to back it up. But we're talking about this one in particular. He didn't really do anything. I didn't really feel the presence of a Chiefs coaching staff, except for Steve Spagnuolo melting down as the game went on. I don't really feel like Andy Reid did much to impact this game. There were no, he didn't really have to, but there weren't really any challenges or anything here where you could make your presence known, and he didn't do anything on the play calling to make his presence known. Patrick Mahomes kind of kept putting himself in weird positions, and I don't know. It felt like the Chiefs had the spirit snatched from them before the first half was really over. But watching the game, you're watching it and you're going, oh yeah, this isn't going well for the Chiefs. And then they'll put up a graphic and it's like Eagles yards 100, Chiefs 2. And it genuinely, I felt shocked. I was like, it couldn't have been that bad. Surely they've done more than 2 yards worth of football here. But in the first half, they really didn't. They could not go anywhere. So I think for me, major props to this Eagles defense, major props to Jalen Hurts, and the offense as a whole for staying resilient. I guess the Chiefs defense that really did do everything they could. They didn't make it easy on them either. There were a good bit of punts in this game, especially early on. The Chiefs tried to keep the pace down and hope that the Eagles wouldn't capitalize on them not being able to score. Second quarter, they got away from them, but I think for the Chiefs, I want to put a lot of praise on the Eagles first, and then for the Chiefs, I agree. I think it comes down to Patrick Mahomes. I think takes a little bit of blame here just for the way he played. I feel like his energy towards this game kind of trailed off a little bit, and he seemed out of it as the game was going on. Andy Reid, non-existent here, um, and then honestly, just the rest of the offense. I wouldn't want to put too much on the defense for this game. I feel like they did a lot considering what was happening. They didn't allow all 40, but they allowed most of it. But I still feel like this is more just the Chiefs' offense disaster game. Couldn't get it together. Couldn't get down the field. Couldn't get a first down. To be honest, for a long time. And then even when you start scoring, it's not really because you're cutting up the Eagles' defense and marching them downfield for the most part. You're just throwing it as far as you can and getting it down there. And it was a free play, but on another play, Patrick Mahomes threw a pick six that was taken off because it was. I mean, he threw it up because the flag was thrown, but it just felt like I think watching the whole time as the runner took it back to the house, I kind of thought like this is getting called back, but it just felt like an amalgamation of what had happened throughout the rest of the game, and you could just kind of see the body language of the Chiefs was bad. I mean, Chris Jones fell to his knees at some point. Things did not seem to be going very well for Kansas City, and mostly their offense. So I can understand the frustration on a guy like Chris Jones to think you're getting somewhere, and then Patrick Mahomes throws an untimely pick. So yeah, props to the Eagles defense for this one, and I'll give props to the Chiefs defense, but the Chiefs offense for a two-time back-to-back team that didn't really change much between, especially since last year. This looked really, really bad.
Yeah, and just some food for thought here to finish out. Like a lot of people having GOAT debates, him versus Tom Brady, yada yada yada. We don't really do all that on this program here, but a lot of people after the game were saying, like, look, Tom Brady lost Super Bowls. I mean, he lost 2 Super Bowls to Eli Manning, who I understand he has 2 Super Bowls, but like Eli Manning was never like an elite, top 5 type of guy, right? But he lost 2 Super Bowls to Eli Manning, who was playing the best football of his career in those 2 runs. He lost to Nick Foles. But people are saying it's like, look, man, like Tom lost Super Bowls. He lost those 3, but he lost by like a total of like 20 points between them. And the 2 Super Bowls that Mahomes has lost now, they've just been the same thing, overwhelming. Offensive line play obviously bad, but overwhelmingly, like Mahomes wasn't really great. I mean, he was trying his absolute best in that Tampa Bay game because he had guys dropping balls. But people are gonna look at this now differently. They're gonna look at Mahomes because people were saying like, hey, maybe he's the GOAT if he gets a three-peat, even though he'll be, 3 Super Bowls behind Brady. He might be the GOAT, but with this, I think it does probably put the discussion to bed for a bit. And the Chiefs will be back, of course. They'll be fine. They'll regroup. They'll reload. They got some contract stuff coming up. But I do think for now, people are going to look at Mahomes just a little bit differently because of this performance. Even if they had lost, if it hadn't been that bad, that would have been one thing. But people are making jokes like, hey, this is what happened when the Chiefs don't have the rest on their side. And when you get whooped like this against a team that you're supposed to be at least somewhat even with, that's going to stick with you. So, again, congratulations to the Eagles. They definitely deserved it.